Dave Pryor. Welcome to The Reluctant Agilist. I'm here with Jardena London. Thank you for taking time out of your morning.
So happy to be here, Dave.
And we have occupied similar realms, but at different times. It's like there's this weird connection thing where we never quite sync up. So it was really great to finally meet you this morning.
I think we're actually the same person. You're my alter ego.
Yes, exactly. So we're going to talk about the new thing that you're building. We're going to talk about the work that you've already done. But kind of easing our way into that, would you mind introducing yourself to the folks that are watching and listening?
Sure. Jardena London. I am mostly a business agility consultant, but I do various things. I just mix them all into my big cauldron of stuff. I was a techie. I was a programmer. I ran a software company for a long time, but then I realized the problems I wanted to solve were not in the software. They were in between the people. So I got into Agile and then more into just creating better organizations.
Okay. So that was a really interesting part of the book, which we should mention the title of in a second. But your focus on just acknowledging that it's not process. It's actually the connection where everything goes sideways.
It's that in between that always bites you. Yeah.
And the book is
Cultivating Transformations, a leader's guide to connecting the soulful and the practical.
All right. And if you're watching this, I screwed that up 3 times. So that was my bad. All right. So this is a book about agile transformation, or how would you explain it?
It's really transformation.
Okay.
And it's about transformational leadership. I do use a lot of Agile examples because that's my world, but it is about how to successfully lead a transformational effort, a transformational initiative.
Okay. And you talk about in the book that there's 3 different, I guess, levels that this occurs at. Go ahead. Do you mind?
Yeah. So as leaders, we have to think about ourselves, the me, that how am I affecting the world around me? So really getting grounded in ourselves. So the me, the we, and the system. So It's me, myself, how I affect other people, and then what system am I building that's supporting all of those folks.
That really resonated with me because in my classes, I always talk about how, like, if you're there as a coach or a scrum master, it's not just the team, it's each individual team member abandoning, like for me as a PMP, abandoning everything I knew and learning to accept a different way, and then work with other people who are struggling with the same thing in an organization that was designed to not let us do what we're trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So you do have to affect the system, but you can't really tackle the system until you have mastered yourself and others. But it's like the me part is like the butterfly effect, right? As soon as you walk into a room, you're impacting it. Right?
Okay.
So you have to really, or a virtual room, whatever it is. So you really do have to understand how you are impacting the world around you.
Okay. So I would like to use that as a bridge to get to the idea of soulful, and how if I was going to show up either virtually or in person, I want to be an authentic, soulful version of myself. So what does that mean to you? Because you explained that people had a lot of different interpretations of the word.
Yeah, when I first started using the word soulful, I got some questions like, is it religious? Is it spiritual? Is it diversity? It's sure, yes, if that's what it is for you. But really what I mean is just being authentic, is just being able to bring not just your whole self to work, but your whole, like, what's inside you. So, and I use the word soul instead of happy because happy or joy, which are wonderful things, but we're just not joyful all the time. Like, bad things happen in the world and that's okay. And we should be able to, like, feel those emotions and it should be fine and not have to pretend that we're happy.
That's awesome. There was a part of me that was like, when I read Soulful, I was just thinking of Sam and Dave in the back of my head singing. I was like, this is great. This is a great use of it. But I think maybe all of the things, all the different layers of the way people could interpret Soulful combined are what create that sense of who you are when you get there.
Yeah.
Good, bad, like you bring the whole show.
Yeah, it's the whole thing. It's all of you. And I think that the subtitle, Connecting the Soulful and the Practical, I wrote that when I wrote the book, and it is always important to me, but it has become more and more important since I wrote that down. Because it really has been treated as 2 different things, where we get business results over here and we do some team building over there. And it's like 2 different things. And it's the soft skills and the hard skills. They're not different. they directly impact each other. So I am a big believer in building structures, getting business results for soulful reasons,
Right.
and vice versa, right? Because being able to support your family is a soulful thing. So
Yeah.
these two things, I just really want them to be much more connected.
Okay. And I think, at least when I was looking through the book, there's a hint of Brene Brown ish type stuff in that, which I was really excited to see because I love her work,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes I have trouble connecting it at work. And ever since that one episode of Mythic Quest, I'm afraid to even talk about it at work. So
I don't know that episode.
David, the manager, was talking about Brene Brown, and it was done in a way that it made it look like if you read Brene Brown, you're like David, the manager. So
Okay. Well, so yeah, so I was a certified Dare to Lead facilitator. I did study under Brene Brown, so I do love the work, but I do feel like what was missing from the work, and she makes some attempts at it. It's very personal, the work.
yeah.
Like it's the me, it's all the me, and a little bit of the we, but the system is not there. So I tried to take that Brene Brown work into the system level.
Okay. So I wanna explore that. I'm gonna start at the personal level though. So when
Hmm.
I think about what you just said, I'm thinking that if I'm on a team and we're going through some aspect of transformation in our organization, whatever kind it is, um, there are days and times when that's really hard for everybody. It's hard for us to get along. It's hard for us to figure it out. We don't feel supported by the organization. And
Hmm.
that's got to be okay. Ideally, we could make it okay for us to be struggling and not feel like, oh, we can't be struggling or we have to just instantly fix this.
Right.
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 And
So
then, oh, good.
no, no, no. Go ahead.
Extending that out to the organization, we have to create a space where it's okay for us to say, you know what? Yeah, we don't know how to do this. We don't have the muscles for this in our organization right now. We have no practice. Everything we have here is set up to fight against this, and it's going to suck, but we're going to work through it anyway because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. So there's a difference between hard work and frustrating lack of agency type of work,
Okay.
right? So as long as we can build some channels, we can see some possibilities, we can try different things, we're all good. We can work hard.
Yeah.
It's when the rug's pulled out from under you and you feel like you don't have agency to ever make any of those changes, that's when it's not soulful, right? That's when the organization is doing things and you say, oh, well, that's above my pay grade. I can't affect that at all.
Yeah.
So as long as there's a possibility or a channel, we can be frustrated all day long.
So it's when you just said soulful there, I was thinking that in this context, the opposite of it would be soulless.
Yeah. Soulless.
So you can create, or an organization can sometimes appear that way if it's just that everything's supposed to happen and you're supposed to suck it up and do it. I mean, like the worst
Yeah.
version of Taylorism.
So when people ask me what I mean by soulful, which I get that a lot, I do think it's easier to think about the opposite because we do say
Okay.
soulless, soul sucking, soul
Yeah.
crushing, like all those words, we know what those mean. So the opposite of that is soulful. So,
Okay.
right. Yeah. The extreme Taylorism, sure,
Okay.
where
So
you have no agency. You just do
yeah.
what you're told. You know, and I have so many examples of this, but there's so many organizations where, like people get budget and then their performance, and they're going to be judged on the performance of getting work done, and then they can't get people to work on it because of hiring freezes or
Yeah.
whatever policies and things, procurement. And so you have the money and you have the goal, but you can't get the work done, and that's endlessly frustrating, and
Yeah.
that's lack of agency.
I mean, I'm working with a place right now where I'm trying to teach them to do Scrum at a team level, but these teams are work is committed for them at the quarterly level that they don't understand. That's much too much to do. And then they're told you have to do it all by the end of the quarter, but don't overcommit in any sprint and you have to meet your commitment. It's like you can't have both at the same time.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
they're told that that's what they're supposed to do, which is takes it right back to the me level, right? I can't do that in this organization. I can't thrive. So I'm going to like just go into shutdown defense mode.
Right, right, exactly. And I hear people a lot of times. I hear a lot of agilists say, "Well, I don't want to go work anywhere where they're not ready for me." And so it depends on your job, of course. But if you're a transformational leader,
Yeah.
of course they're not ready for you. That's why you're there. So, and Christopher Avery says, do you only want to transform people, organizations who don't need it? I mean, there is a little bit of, you're putting yourself into a frustrating situation,
Yeah.
knowing that that's your job to change it.
And knowing that now I've got Christopher Avery in the back of my head, which if anybody doesn't know who Christopher Avery is, you need to go read his books.
Yeah. Like
um,
the responsibility process is
yeah.
really,
You show up. I mean, that's one of the things, people that do have that soulless place to work. You're the one that chooses to show up every day. So you got to own that. Maybe you've got a reason for it. I got to feed my family, like you said, or whatever it is. Um, Nobody's making you do that.
right. But here's the showing up thing. So here's the soulful thing. If you're working in a soulless place and maybe you don't have the ability to change the thing you'd like, what can you bring to bring soul into that environment? I mean, you
Okay.
might bring a spark of joy to the people around you. You might bring like some hope or possibility or open up new possibilities. Like there's something you can bring to that
Yeah.
because even in a toxic environment, just because the company's toxic, that doesn't mean that people deserve to be in that environment,
Yeah.
right? So I think that if we can't heal the company, we can still heal the people.
So it's interesting the way you said that, because I think about it in a slightly different way, which is when I am in a toxic environment and when I can remember to have the presence of mind to think about this or any kind of negative situation. It's what there's got to be something I can learn here. There's something I can get from this. There's some benefit. Like I go into like a very me kind of a thing. I
Hmm.
have to have something that I can walk out of this with, some reason to withstand this suck for a little while, so that I come out better on the other end. And maybe I can help other people with that as well. But
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. I mean, and that agreed. And that healing is really so necessary in so many places that if you look for a place that doesn't need any healing, you'd be looking for a while.
and it'd be really boring when you got there.
And there would be nothing to do, right? There'd be no,
Yeah.
you'd have to have a different job.
So you talk about healing an organization. I'm curious. Can you just explain that a little bit? Because I understand helping people recover from the trauma of the other places they've worked, or helping the team recover from the trauma of working in the organization. But an
Mm.
organization that doesn't know that it needs help, how do you help them see that and recover from that?
Yeah. So they know something, right? They know some symptom is happening.
Okay.
So, and sometimes the pain is the past, right? There's pain, there's just baggage that they have. And sometimes, the story about the monkeys, like maybe
Mm-hmm.
none of those people even worked there when that pain happened, but it's been passed on. The trauma's been passed on through the organization. So I think looking at the symptom of like, what do they think they want and why and what's blocking it is really key to being able to heal from some of that past
Okay.
trauma. And I think that, yeah, it's not just the people, it's not, again, it's not just the individuals. There's a systemic healing that needs to happen. And I wrote an article for the Business Agility Journal about that you really can't do transformation until you have healed that festering wound. So
Okay.
you really do need to at least acknowledge it. Sometimes that's all it takes, right? Just
Yeah.
acknowledging the pain and to be able to move on because no one's even actually said it out loud in some of these organizations.
But that is a scary thing. I mean, for any individual, there's some dysfunction stuff like you're willing to be like, yeah, that's true. But the other stuff you're so busy denying without even realizing it that even if somebody holds up the mirror, you may not be ready to see it, which is a lot of the companies we show up at.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have to just say here, I've sounded woo woo so far, and I'm not a therapist. Like there are people who specialize in organizational therapy, so maybe we need to call them. But all I
Okay.
can say is that we can identify that as a necessary step. I mean, I have some facilitation skills to bring some of this out, but at some
Yeah.
point, like you need to get a real expert in there.
Okay. So are there actually organizational therapists? I don't even know. Is that a thing? That should
I
be a
think so.
thing.
Yeah, yeah. I
Okay.
know some folks who do that. Yeah.
Like the whole place is going to go to therapy. Um,
Well, it's systemic therapy, though. It's like it's therapy of the system.
okay. Can you give an example of that?
I gave the example I talk about in the book, I think, yeah, was this example where I was at a very large company and there was just this constant conflict between finance and product, right? So product wanted
Uh-huh.
to launch, finance wasn't ready. And it was like this constant back and forth. And when I came in, they were like, it's been a problem for years. We're just going to keep launching products and then they'll just pile up at finance's door and then they won't get launched. And I was like, and then like,
And they
we're going to
blame them
go,
afterwards.
and we can blame them. But I was like, and we're
Yeah.
going to all go out of business. Like the company's going to go out of business or like, what's the
Okay.
plan there? And that, I mean, that just needed to be like acknowledged. We like, why is it important to launch new products? Why is it important to have finance? How can, and there were some just regular work management strategies to fix that.
Right.
But that was a pain. And no one was acknowledging the fact like, this is a pretty big deal.
So the people forget why they're there, why the company forgets why it's there. It becomes all about, it's like a holiday dinner at a bad dysfunctional family.
Well, it's yeah, dysfunctional family picnic. So
Yeah.
there was a lot of times I see this. I just had a conversation recently with a client where there was this wonderful person doing jobs like many of us do, well, like a project manager type thing, where he was trying to be the liaison or the diplomat between two
Right.
organizations. And he said to me, he said, "Well, I think I can get what Group A wants enough to make them happy, and what Group B wants." And I said, "What does the company want?" Right?
Hmm.
It's not about this. That's the pain of that. We're working across purposes
Yeah.
forever. And, that's painful. Now there's worse pain, right? There's pain of
Yeah.
prior like unethical things that have
Hmm.
happened or, bad things that are in the company's history or firings and hirings, like there's all
Yeah.
kinds of bad stuff that can happen.
And some of that stuff you probably, I mean, maybe you can't even recover from. It's a part of our history that we have to just accept and try to move on from.
But acknowledging it is
Yeah.
really helpful.
So that person that you talked about that's doing the kind of mediation or trying to smooth things over, and which is a very noble thing, but at the same
Hmm.
time really just fostering dysfunction because they're enabling it even further.
Yeah.
um, and I feel like a lot of people who are trying to help an organization transform end up in that place because it's like the best they can do for right now. But maybe not, maybe they're trying to do things at a grander scale. They need help.
Hmm. Yep.
And so this is the segue into the new thing.
Oh, the community. Yeah. So that's why so I think we've alluded to, but let's hit the nail on the head here. Transformational leadership is hard.
Yeah.
I started this, I wrote the book because I had done a talk called How to Lead a Transformation Without Getting Fired. And it's not uncommon, right? Because you're fighting the status quo, maybe your boss, maybe your boss's boss, and you're telling them that they're doing things wrong, sort of. And it's just, it doesn't always end well for the
Yeah.
messenger. The messenger gets shot. So being able to do that with some tact is important. That's why I wrote the book. But the community is there for us to all support each other. So we can talk about strategies and tactics of doing the work, but we can also support each other in just like, this is hard sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be. I mean, there was one place I worked where one of the questions that you had to answer every week was, what did you do to try to get fired this week? Because we were expected to be such severe irritants in the organization that if you weren't pissing people off, you weren't pushing hard enough.
That's awesome. I worked with a
It's
transformational
awesome if
leader.
you know you're going to
Yeah.
get sent to another client when you get fired from that
Right.
place.
Right. Right. Well, I worked with a transformational leader once who said, on any given day, I don't know if I'm going to get fired or promoted.
Yeah.
And it was like, I was like, that's perfect. That's exactly what you should be doing.
And I don't think it's woo to say that that's a very unstable place to live. I mean, if that's because that is true. You're not really sure how what you say is going to hit, if they're going to respond to it. And there's lots of practical, tactical information about how the stuff we do works, but
Hmm.
it's scary to be out on that ledge.
Well, and that's why that's why the community and the book and my upcoming training course, stay tuned, is really to build those skills
Okay.
needed to do the best you can there, right? I mean, diplomacy and tact are important things in this job. It's not just about, when we talk about truth teller and disruptor, you need to have some diplomacy and tact in
Yeah.
order to be a truth teller. You can't just be from Brooklyn. Joking.
Yeah.
I'm a New Yorker originally, but it's not just about saying it. It's about saying it effectively.
Yeah. And that's, I'm assuming that you agree with this. I think of that as occurring on many levels. So I have to be able to do it at a personal level
Mm-hmm.
and provide, I guess, support for myself in the same way that I have to provide it for the organization, because it's transformation all up and down the food chain.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So this the transformational leadership job will it will kick your ass and you'll learn a ton about yourself. I mean, that's why self-awareness is the first chapter in the book, because get like continually getting that self-awareness is key. But what
Yeah.
does Brene Brown say, and I think she's quoting somebody else when she says, the truth will set you free, but first it'll kick your ass.
Yeah.
Like, it is, you really do have to evolve and evolve fast.
So how do you recommend people? I'd like to talk about how people can get started with that on a
Mhm.
personal level, but then talk about, which I think, when Christopher Avery says when you start to read the responsibility process, you have to stop yourself from applying it to everyone else. Once you start looking at yourself, the next thing is, well, the company, they're the ones that are really screwed up. Um, how can you be tactful and thoughtful in approaching it with the organization?
Well, I think looking at where there's opportunity. So Aaron Dignan in the Brave New Work talks about the adjacent possible. So I think that's where a lot of transformational leads trip up, is that
Okay.
they take a step too far that people aren't ready for. So looking at what, if you're on that little stepping stone path,
Hmm.
what is that next stepping stone that's available and helpful and will heal the pain and will help uh, people be more successful, or whatever the case, whatever they're looking for.
Yeah.
That's the next step. It's not the step 5 steps out that you can see, because there's no right there's no honor in crashing and burning because you can see into the future. It doesn't
Yeah.
help. And I see so many transformational specialist leads, whatever, fall into that trap of trying to recommend something that's just too far of a leap at that point
For that person or
for
that
that
company.
organization. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know I give the example, I think, in the book of a consultant that came in and was like, you need to limit your whip. I mean, this was an organization where the culture was, being able to do a lot of things at once. Like, that
Yeah.
was valued. And this was, it just weren't there. And the person tried to convince me that he was right. I'm like, I know you're right, but they're
We're
not
not
there.
ready. Yeah.
And he was there for one day.
Well, that's hard though. Like, and I think it also, there are certain things where I can do that. I can see where someone is and say, okay, well, can you just try to do this and see what happens? But there's other topics, like when I try to talk to people about personal Kanban, I mean, I go right to, I've been doing it for like 15 years. So I go right to the very end of it, which they don't need. They just want to get their work done. Um,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think in enthusiasm for having found a solution for a problem we have, we often push it on other people without letting them find their own path to it, which agile coaches do all the time.
The curse of the newly converted, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's the zealot. That is, you do have to sort of temper that.
Yeah.
Right? That's the we. That is really sensing and feeling, and there's a soulful thing there of like it's funny. Agilists we say meet them where they are, and then we never do
Yeah.
it. So that's the meeting them where they are. Like, where are they?
Yeah. So how is the community that you're fostering going to support that? Like, well, first of all, what are you calling the community? We should probably do that
The
first.
transformational leadership community.
Okay.
I tried to find a clever name, but this is self-explanatory. So that's
Okay.
what it's called. And yeah, so it will be, at least the free initial launch is just to have a place to collaborate with each other on the challenges we're facing. We'll put, we have a lot of prompts about things from the book, how,
Mhm.
how they're resonating with you. So we can have some discussion about that. We'll have some live sessions with me, just talking about doing deeper dives into some of the topics,
Okay.
and things that you would expect to find in a community. But also, it's really about supporting each other through this work. And the other piece there too is, this is an undefined field. Like, I
Hmm.
see a lot of people with this title now, but who has defined what this is? So I'm
Yeah.
attempting to put some kind of boundary or definition around what this job means and how and what the competencies are to succeed in it.
Okay. So on the competency side, I know you've been very careful about, you say you don't want to be too woo woo with it, but all the tactical stuff, I think people gravitate towards that because it's all there. I mean, people have already, like, it's easy to say this is what a point was supposed to be. This is why it's not this, or this is why this practice works and this one doesn't. But the
Hmm.
other part of it, the part where you're venturing into, which I think people are scared of, we've not really talked about that. And those are competencies like emotional intelligence, social engineering, understanding how to interpret all the stuff that project managers used to call soft skills, as
Yeah.
well as helping companies and people cope with trauma and things like that. Those are the things that were harder that I think we blew off because it was easier to talk about how long a sprint was supposed to be.
Yeah. But how long a sprint is supposed to be has a soulful purpose, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
none of these things operate in isolation. But I think just even asking the question of, and I have this 5 steps to soul, which you can download. I'll give you the link for your show
Oh,
notes.
cool.
But asking the question with the first question of the 5 steps is, what was the original soulful purpose of this?
Mm-hmm.
And just thinking, or where is the pain?
Yeah.
Where did we lose the connection to soul? Because everything has a soulful purpose. Had anyway, we just lose it.
Yeah. I think so. John Cutler, one time I did an interview with him. We were talking about his sprint, and he said, if you were going to hire a sprint to do a job at your company, what is the sprint's job? And I think but that question with the question that you just asked together could be a really, it could change the way that we look at all the stuff we're doing and maybe help people get out of that just do the thing this way kind of mindset,
Yeah.
be
Oh,
more
I love
present.
that. Yeah. What's the soulful job to be done?
Oh, there you go.
There you
Wow.
go.
That's nice. Um, so I think there's a part of my brain that's a little skeptical about it because it's just a little bit fields of dreamy, but um, people need help with this. And we were also talking before about something you said in another interview where you referred to being I think you called it a transformationalist as being a calling.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, because I feel that way about the job that I have. And sometimes I talk about it with people. Oh, my light just went out. And they look at me like I'm on crack. So when
Oh,
you say it's a calling, what do you mean by that?
I guess folks who want to lead transformations or be transformational leaders, it's a hard job. There are easier jobs. There are easier ways to make money. But
Yeah.
folks who want to do this are compelled to do it. They're pulled towards it. They these are folks that want to be a disruptor or be a truth teller. There's some kind of inner drive to do that. Sometimes when I hear people say, I want to go be the transformation lead because that's a stepping stone for my career, I'm like, ooh, that's maybe not your best move if that's what your goal is. But
You
folks that
get
are
ahead by
really,
pissing people off.
yeah, yeah, right, exactly. You may not make friends. You might
Yeah.
get fired. So if it's a calling for you, and I think it's a necessary role for folks to play in the world,
Yeah.
then we're here to support you. And Dave,
Okay.
I'll just add this one. The other thing about the calling. So like for me everyone has a different calling, but for me
Yeah.
personally, we spend a lot of time at work. And when we work in a dysfunctional way, and that's typical, like most of us work 8 hours a day in a toxic environment or in a dysfunctional environment, that affects the rest of our lives and
Yeah.
our society and our world. And I don't mean to make something big about this, but if this is how we're behaving most of our waking hours, what does that say about the rest of the world? So
Yeah.
if we can fix it 1%, it's huge.
Yeah. I feel like I had a conversation about this with my wife yesterday, so I feel like I need to create safety for some other people. There are people I know who their calling is not about work. It
Mhm.
is their family or their band or whatever they're doing, and work is a means to that end.
And that's
But
totally fine.
and that's totally fine. But
Yeah.
for a bunch of us, like I always ask the question, like if you wake up sick at 3 o'clock in the morning with the flu, why can you still not wait to get to work? Like it's the thing that gets you up to go do that every day because you get to change the world or help one person or do whatever it is.
Dave, I went through a lot of periods of soul searching in my life. And through a lot of those, I came back to the same job, but I came back to the same job for a different reason. right? Or with a different sort of inner drive.
Yeah.
Because I think you can fulfill your purpose in any job. Maybe not any,
Mhm.
but in many jobs, right? Because your purpose isn't to do the work. Your purpose is deeper than that.
Mhm.
So I think, it's not about the job that it is, it's about why you're there.
Okay.
So like
And
there's lots of movies about this. I can't even think of one off the top of my head, but where it's you know what? There's a great Disney video. I'll put it in. I'll give it to you for the show notes.
okay.
Called Inner Workings, and he has a really boring job. It's just a little short.
Right.
He has a really boring job with all boring people doing data entry. It's just over and over. And he, like, by the end of the video, spoiler alert, he brings joy to the people doing it, right?
Yeah.
They dance, they play music. It's nice. So it's not about the job, it's about what you bring to it,
How you show up.
how you
And
show up.
also I think how you see your role. Like there's that story about the guy at NASA who swept floors that said he helped put men on the moon. Um,
I
how
didn't know that.
you yeah, I think John Kennedy asked the guy about what he did and he said he put men on the moon. He cleaned up the workspace so
Yeah.
that the people that put men on the moon could put men on the moon.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that that's a big part of it too, is how we frame it. And so if you're working in any kind of organizational transformation, for me, I feel like 9 days out of 10, I'm just banging my head against a wall. But the one day that I'm not, the one day where I say something and I can see it create a change, like that's pretty rewarding. But I have
Hmm.
to walk into it every day with the expectation, I feel like I do, the expectation that I'm throwing seeds at the ground and I never know what's going to happen because I won't be there when it happens.
Oh, I love that. So that is so true. I want all your listeners to remember that. You never know, you may never know that your seed grew. So that, because how many times has that happened to you? It's happened to me so many times where
Yeah.
I'll find out years later and someone will say, you changed my life that one day. And I'm like, I did. And if
I
I
don't
hadn't
even
run into
remember
you,
that day.
if I didn't
Yeah.
run into you at Walmart, okay, I don't shop at Walmart, but if I didn't run into you at Target,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have known that. You might never know.
Yep. Yeah. So this community will be able to offer support not just from a practices standpoint, but also kind of working through that, deepening the skills that are not the more readily available ones, maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Right. And making you feel like you're not alone. A lot of folks in this job are they're more it's more common now to have people with transformational job titles, but a lot of times you're the only one. And
Yeah.
so this gives you peers of other people doing your work, facing the challenges you are. It's hard on the soul. I mean,
Yeah.
it is, what did you say? It's a beat down,
Yeah. And I
right?
think it's really important. Like there's one community that I'm a part of that I show up no matter how tired I am, no matter how broken I feel, because I know it doesn't even matter what we're doing. I just know that a half an hour with that group of people, it's like somebody pumped me full of air again. Um,
Yeah.
because they care about the stuff. I guess maybe this, for me, this is one of the main things. They care about the stuff I care about the same way I care about it.
Oh.
They hold it as dear as I do. So, and it's okay for me to embarrass myself in front of them or to say whatever because I know that we're all aimed at the same thing,
Mm.
which is a big part of this. If you're doing this kind of work, you need
Yeah.
people that are aware of the fact that we're all struggling through it together.
Yeah, that's the psychological safety. So
Yeah.
I talk about it in the book, but I will just share with you. There's Tim Clark's talks about psychological safety being or innovation needing high social security, social safety, right? Like that.
Okay.
I'm not going to laugh at you or think you're a jerk, or make fun of you or whatever, make you belittle you. So there's that social um, safety, but
Yeah.
really high intellectual friction. So
Yeah.
I
Oh,
still
that's
need to
good.
be able to,
Intellectual
right?
friction.
We always say like, we should be able to debate ideas without getting upset. That's why, because I can
Yeah.
disagree with you without making you feel like you're an idiot.
Yeah.
Right?
Who's that?
Like
Who's that
it's
you're
Tim
referring?
Clark. It's the book is
Oh,
Psychological
okay.
Safety. That's what he writes about.
Oh, okay.
Um, and I reference it in my book too. But
Okay.
that I thought was so brilliant because it doesn't mean everyone gets a trophy. It doesn't mean we agree on everything. It
Yeah.
means you're not going to be an outcast and I'm going to disagree with you.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
See, and I guess I feel like with my Philly upbringing that you have to be able to mock people, but there's still a safety.
Okay, if that's part of the culture, then yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's not that's not out
I
of the
know.
question.
I'm just Just making a joke about it. All right. So you
Yep.
just went live, right?
Yep.
And where can people come to find out more about this?
Yep. So you can go to cultivatingtransformations.com and
Okay.
find a link there. And you can jump right into the community. It's free. So just sign up and join in.
Okay. And I highly recommend the book Cultivating Transformations. You're in your second edition now, right?
We did some slight tweaks to it, yes. New
Okay.
cover, new layout. It's available in Spanish now. And oh,
Nice.
I will also just plug myself here. The book just won a Nautilus Award, which is
Awesome.
Books for a Better World. So it's that soulfulness there. Who
That's
thought?
great.
I mean, in high school, I would have been the least likely to write a soulful book, right? A book with soulful in the title. That's what I was voted. Least
But
likely.
maybe that's exactly why it's so important because your background is tech and programming and things like that.
Math. Yeah, I was a math major, computer
And
science.
and we need a balance there. And I think the business world is so heavily focused on the soulless that they forget about the soulful part.
I think sometimes the people who struggle more because we figure it out, are able to communicate better than someone who it
Yeah.
comes naturally to, right? Like I wanted to
Okay.
have a job where I didn't have to talk to anybody. That was the job. I wanted to be a programmer because I didn't want to talk to anybody.
Yeah.
And then like now here I
You
am.
realize why you need. So maybe that's also another thing is the stuff that we're running away from is the stuff that we probably need the most.
That's very interesting too. Yeah.
So what? All right. One last question. What is the one thing in the book that to you is like the secret hidden thing that people don't always notice?
There's a lot of secret hidden things, but I think one of the things that I do maybe I'll call out here is resonance. So
Okay.
resonance and frequency. So thinking about how you are resonating. We talked about showing up, but when you
Hmm.
think about resonance, like as a wavelength, the more wavelengths you can transmit on, the more
Okay.
people will resonate with you, right? So thinking
Okay.
about like, are you a record scratch or are you, some kind
Yeah.
of harmony? And thinking about, I used to have a friend who would say, are you transmitting on multiple colors in the spectrum or is it just
Huh.
purple? Because if you just transmit purple, all the purple people will understand and resonate with you. But if
Yeah.
the more you can broaden that spectrum, the more you can resonate across the board. So just thinking about like, how can I expand my resonance?
So that is really interesting because I'm a communications major and I
Oh,
always think about, or I was, I always think about how everything about me when I show up is communicating. The way I'm standing, my voice, the way I'm dressed, the things I say, how many expletives fall out of my mouth by accident, like all of that. And I know that every signal I transmit comes with a certain amount of noise.
mm-hmm.
So maybe not just I have to be aware of the signal and the resonance at the same time.
Yeah.
All the frequencies and how much they are maybe it'd be like a record that was poorly mixed. If the stuff is too muddied, you can't hear what's actually going on.
Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting that you're a communications major. I would love to get more feedback from you on that.
We can do that when we come back and talk about the Tao Te Ching and the art of war and how that all ties into this stuff.
Yeah, we have that's a whole thing. I have to finish those
Yeah.
88 verses. I think
Cool.
I only did
All right.
like 12.
So can you explain what that is and then I'll ask for your contact stuff.
Sure, sure. I used to have a blog, and it's all still up there. That was a daily cartoon about work with a blog attached with something about work. And so we did a series called the Tune Te Ching, which was basically taking the verses of the Tao Te Ching and pairing it with a cartoon, and then applying some of the lesson in that verse to our work lives. And I think we got about 12 or 15 of them, but maybe we need to pick those up.
It's a very cool idea though. It's really good stuff. And they can find all that where?
On any of my websites, rosettaagile.com,
Okay.
jardenalondon.com, and then, of course, cultivatingtransformations.com, which focuses on the book.
Okay. And they can also find you on LinkedIn.
Yes, LinkedIn is a great place to follow because that's where I post any recent articles. So, yeah, please connect to me on LinkedIn, Jardena
And they'll be able
London.
to find your threads link there.
Absolutely. And there's no other Jardena Londons or really Jardinas. So just,
Well, I was gonna say this. Whenever I've heard people talk about you, I didn't even know what your last name was until this morning because people just say Jardina, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's like Prince. It's
yeah,
like
share. Madonna.
So this
Someone
was
said to me
awesome.
once, "Oh, you're like Cher or Madonna," and I was like, "In what possible way?" And he was like, "Well, you only need one name," and I was like, "Oh, because I
There
can't
you
sing
go.
and I
Yeah.
can't dance."
Well, this was awesome. I appreciate the work that you're doing for the community too, for all of us that need the assistance with the things we don't either know or admit we need assistance with.
Yeah, I hope
So,
to see you all there. I would love
yeah,
it.
cool. All right. And so I'll put all links to your stuff. Plus, you're going to send me the links for the things we talked about. They can pick up your book, Cultivating Transformations, at Amazon or any place where fine books are sold.
Correct.
All right. Thank you very much for
All
making time for
right.
this. It's great
Wonderful.
talking to
Thank
you.
you, Dave.
If you learn to work the old way, but the new way's what you need, my job's to make that switch from old to new. Stop